Almost there. You got it, sir. Go ahead.
All right, thanks. For the recording, it's Dave Hoffman, Chairman of the Planning Commission. Call the Joint Planning Commission Board of Supervisors meeting of December 2nd, 2021. Order at 7:05. First order of business is public comment. Do we have any public? I don't know of any.
Looks like we have two members of the public, Ms. Knotts and Ms. Dowling.
Okay. Usually first public comment is comment on things that are not on the agenda. Do you have any? Moving on, approval of the minutes from November 4th. Everybody have a chance to review them?
I read them. I didn't have any issue with them.
The one of note, Mark Harris, I think, was late, but not very late, and he's not listed in the attendance, except that he's noted as closing the meeting, but not listed as being in attendance.
I mean,
I would suggest we make that change.
that's fine. I can write a note for that.
I said that I didn't have anything, but I did see, it says Indian solar farm in Indians and containing. That's under B, should be Indiana, I believe. There is a reference to a solar farm in Indians, which I believe should be Indiana.
Oh, is that in the URL?
Yes.
It's above the
referring to
URL.
Yeah, because the URL I just copied, so the URL is probably wrong.
No,
Or
no,
it's
no,
correct.
it's in, no, it's above that.
Okay. I'll look at that.
Yeah, it's just clearly a typo.
Yeah, okay. All right.
That's fine.
Any-
We can fix that. That's not a problem. Indiana.
Any other changes, Chuck or John?
No?
Can I have a motion to approve?
Should I make a motion to approve? I'll make a motion to approve.
I second that.
All right, all in favor, aye, aye,
Aye.
and no opposed, since we had 3 votes aye. So the next order of business is why we're having the joint meeting is to review what is called the green ordinance. And hopefully I shared with everybody some of the, I guess, 5 items that we had addressed in our PC meeting last time. And appreciate having this ordinance come to the Planning Commission. But a lot of questions arose at the last Planning Commission with maybe the intent of why the ordinances were written the way they were. And obviously the job of the Planning Commission is to raise questions when an applicant or a homeowner comes in and we try to apply these ordinances, and thought it would be best to have a joint discussion instead of potentially protracting the ordinance review even longer by not all getting on the same meeting. So in no particular order, or if any of the supervisors would like to share with us their intents with this ordinance in terms of, are we hopefully encouraging homeowners and landowners to use green energy, but also trying to mitigate the effects of large solar arrays in our township?
So Dave, I can start. So this ordinance is going back and forth even within the board, a number of times, a number of different people have looked at it. So what we tried to do is to get it to a place that we're pretty good with, but we wanted to get it past the PC's eyes to see if there were any gaps, anything that we missed. And so the intent was not for you guys to do prolonged discussion on it, but to go through it and identify any gaps and bring that to our attention. I think that's what you've done. And just as you characterized it, the intent was to make it as simple as possible for the individual homeowners. So I wouldn't know if we advocate it or not advocate it, but it's just more about laying it out and keep it simple so it's a doable thing for an individual homeowner if they should decide to do that. But in the same breath, for folks that want to do the larger, more commercial type, that we did put the right checks and balances in place, because there are issues with it, and I think you guys have identified some. There are some issues with in terms of disposal, in terms of land development, that we wanted to get down in writing and to make sure that the responsible thing is being done with the larger facilities. I don't know what we call them non-individual solar energy systems. So that's my take. I don't know if John or Dave want to comment.
Yeah, I can jump in with at least my thought. I don't know if everybody's got a chance to read Chuck's email, and I thought that he brought up a really, really good point here. And my perspective is you don't want to keep people from doing, what they want to do, particularly when it comes to something that's supposed to be, good for us, right? So solar panels and our alternative energy is supposed to be good. And he brought up an excellent point that the way we've written our ordinance will restrict certain kinds of structures. And so here's my concern is I don't know how to word an ordinance to keep people from doing something that doesn't make sense, that is disruptive, versus something that's creative and helpful. And maybe that's not an eloquent way of putting it, but that's kind of where I'm stuck is, well, the fix, and we talked about it a little bit last time at the last PC meeting, was, well, the fix is the person who wants to do something creative and interesting comes to the board and asks for a waiver, right? And just says, okay, well, here's something I want to try. Your ordinance is written this way. Can I get an exception to build this structure? Right. And then we engage the PC again and say, okay, yeah, that structure makes sense. But I don't know if that's the right way to do it. So that's sort of where my questions are, is how do we write it so it's not, you can do whatever you want, wherever you want, versus let's not stop people and let's not dissuade people from doing these kinds of activities in Franklin Township. So that's sort of my struggles. I don't know how you write that eloquently. And maybe my overly simplistic solution was, well, let's just come to the board with those ideas and then we can talk about variances and waivers and that sort of thing. So that's sort of where my head's at. And I think I'm pretty much aligned with Donna as well. So
This ordinance is part of the subdivision and land development? Or is it zoning?
I don't know
Because
that answer.
that would obviously tell us whether they can do a waiver or whether they have to go before the zoning hearing board.
I thought it was subdivision and land development, but I could be wrong because they could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm with you, David. I didn't think it was zoning, but I would only be guessing. Jeff, do you know? Do you have an idea?
I'm aligned with you there, Donna. I think it's subdivision and land development. That was always my impression.
Okay, this is Nancy.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi, Nancy. While we're on that subject,
Okay. Mhm.
can someone clarify? So what would that mean for an applicant?
Whether it's zoning or land development,
Yes.
that's a good question. I don't know.
I guess the point you were making, Dave, is land development. They could ask for a waiver. Zoning, they'd have to go to a zoning board, right? It's
Correct.
different.
Oh, right. Okay.
Right, they'd have to go to the zoning hearing.
Can we make a decision to move it to where we want it to be? Right. So if it's under land development, can we just say as a board, this should be under land development? I mean, and in my mind, that's exactly where it should be, right? It's not, because we
Right.
don't have a zone, we're not zoning for solar, right? I don't think anywhere this ordinance doesn't talk about where you can and can't build. It just talks about the types of structures you can build. So,
Jessica from LTL was on. Do you have any thoughts one way or the other?
I think there maybe has to be a little bit of overlap, but I think the focus is probably more in the subdivision ordinance, just as Dave pointed out, maybe it wasn't Dave, I'm sorry. It's not like you're creating a specific zoning district that would allow this. It's a use or an accessory use,
Correct.
in any district. So I think that land development would probably be I don't know if I want to use the word overruling aspect, but more the focus. But then, that use issue, and I'm sure we'll get down to that in some of these key items that you want to discuss, is whether it's, an individual use or a non-individual use. And maybe that's where it does reflect either by definitions or potentially a slight cross-reference to zoning. I would just be hesitant with that because zoning tends to be the overruling factor, though, before saldo requirements. So I don't know whether that helps or not, but
Yeah, this is Nancy. I don't know if there's a way we can simplify this, but most of I think the biggest risk to us is to have a big company come in. I don't know that we need to legislate individuals. We already say they can't be on the property line. They follow all the standard rules. I'm kind of with Chuck. I mean, I have solar panels, and as these various iterations have come up, I've thought, oh my God, I would have never wanted to do all this or that. So my view is it just becomes up for industrial panels, and we don't necessarily have to approve it until there's someone interested. Right now, I don't know that anyone's interested. So that's my 2 cents.
Can I throw in a thought? I think Chuck has a good point, and I was thinking one way of addressing it would be to create a category, name it whatever you want, but I throw out a thought, innovative solar panel design, and just say this would apply when our other categories don't fit, and this goes to the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors for approval, to keep it relatively simple. That way it gives you a category that probably wouldn't get used very often, but allows you to get out of the restrictions of the other categories. Just a thought.
that's interesting. So I guess someone would say what they want to do doesn't fall into our current zoning.
Right.
So they can say, all right, I've got this innovative design. Let's approach the PC and then the board on this innovative design. I like that idea. That seems like a good way to get around it with still having some eyeballs on the problem. So interesting.
Yeah, and I just want correction, Dave. I wouldn't call it zoning, just it's something different from what's in the ordinance, because this is not about.
Oh yeah. We're not. This is right. It's not zoning. It's land development.
David, there are a couple of points that you might want that I just want to make is that it's really not about zoning. We're not trying to designate it to occur in some areas and not others. The second issue is that forcing somebody to go to the zoning hearing board is a rather onerous procedure compared to asking for a waiver. So I think it just doesn't seem to belong in zoning from those particular points. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I actually think we're in agreement on.
I think to move forward, let's use the working premise that this would be an ordinance in the saldo.
Is there anything that's in there for individuals that you think needs to stay? I mean, I'm not sure how people feel about my suggestion. What I'm suggesting is it's focused only on commercial situations, because we already have a lot of rules. I mean, we had someone come with the solar panel issue and it got solved. So and the technology is going to keep changing. I just think to me, the main thing of all of it is to make sure people decommission their panels. To me, that's the most important thing of all of it. And the rest of it, I think, is really kind of overbearing.
So if somebody wanted to put solar panels on their roof, it would normally be a building permit that is required, correct? That's all that would be required.
I think we just did I don't even know if we did a building permit, but I think we did, because when you connect with Pico, they want to see, other companies want to see what you've done. They want to make sure they want to see the electrician's work. They want to make sure everything's professional. So that's all covered. So I think you're probably right. I think it's just a building permit.
It has been
Anything that goes, but anything that goes beyond that. So anything where it doesn't meet this criteria that we're writing down right now, we would be proposing that they have to do a land development plan?
No, we never asked for that. And I might actually have a different opinion. I like maybe because I've been so involved in it, what we did for the individual property. I don't think it is onerous. And we did not want to do a land development plan for those. So if there's someone can point out what is onerous about this, besides trying to give an individual some direction, I'd like to have that conversation, because I don't see it as onerous.
Yeah, I would just flip it and say what is needed and why. Why do we, what does someone have to do and why? And why can't they just do what they want to do with a building permit?
Oh, we don't want it in the front yard. I mean, just go through the list. I don't think solar panels arrays should be permitted in the front yard. I think there is some things here about roof mounting. You want to make sure you have that they don't extend beyond the ridge line. I think that all seems reasonable. And as you said, I thought Chuck's idea was good. If they come up and that because technology changes, they come up with a different idea and you're calling innovative, let them come to us and ask for a waiver. I think that kind of covers all those issues. Anyways, I'm sure there's others.
That's what
I
my
would
question
like
is. My question is, what does
These
that
people
involve when
don't.
it's special?
I think it gives them makes it wide open. So you're right. It's going to be an interpretation, right? So people look at the individual property solar energy system and they go through that and say, gee, I'm not following it on number 6 or 7. Then we're giving them the out.
Ian, I need to be able to cut in on these people.
I'm sorry, John V.
Can you hear me?
Identify yourself for the tape.
Can you hear me? I'm John Sullivan. All right.
Just so you don't have.
All right.
Do you have? Yeah.
Let me explain something to you. I have
John,
no idea.
are you a member of the public? John, excuse me.
Excuse me?
John, are you a member of the Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I'm a solar.
At the proper time, we'll give you an opportunity to talk.
Okay. Okay. Let me explain something to you. I have solar power in my house for 10 years. And I'm the first one in the entire township that has done so. I understand solar power, and I have recommended to the township that they should power their entire township building with solar panels. Now,
John, excuse me. Do you have a question for the Planning Commission or Board of Supervisors?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I do not.
All right. Thank you. When you do, please acknowledge it and I will recognize you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what I was trying to ask, Donna, you misinterpreted what my question was. My question was, when somebody finds that they're not going to conform to all the items, all A through E, and they find, I don't conform. What are we asking? I believe we're asking them to do a land development plan.
Why does that have to come into consideration for solar panels?
Thank you, John. That's what the question, that's why it was raised.
Okay, so it's,
Do you
that's not.
understand what solar panels?
John,
do?
John, I
John,
would
you
like,
really need to wait for being acknowledged, please. It's going to be a very disorganized
Okay.
meeting.
I understand that, but trust me. All right, go ahead.
I do
need
want to
to
hear from
explain this
John.
to you.
Hold on, guys. I mean, maybe now isn't the right time, but John actually has more experience than probably all of us put together. So at some point, I'd like to hear from John and get his perspective on what he thinks.
So the question
Nancy,
that Chuck has,
am I open to speak?
we have a question and a discussion happening that may
What-
actually shorten your presentation, John.
Specifically, what's your question?
I don't have a question for you. Chuck Phillips had a question whether the current wording of the ordinance required a land development plan. And that's where we are right now in our discussion.
And I was trying to
Absolutely
answer
not.
that by saying that in the individual property solar energy section, that's where we're focused, A, that was not our intent. So if it's coming across that way, then we need to address that, because that was never our intent.
Okay, I
Right,
understand
Chuck.
that. What do you
Right.
want? What do you want?
John,
John-
I'm not acknowledging you yet, please. I will
My
give you an
apologies.
opportunity.
John, we have a time for public comment at the end of the meeting.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Chuck, where do you see that it would require a land development?
Well, it's outside of what is allowed, therefore you have to ask for a waiver. In order to ask for a waiver, don't you need to have a land development plan? You can't just
Why?
walk in and ask for
Why?
a waiver, correct?
Why?
Chuck, if we add this section of the innovative solar panel design or something of that sort, then that gets around that completely, doesn't it? 'Cause
Well,
if
we would have to, so we
if
would
we-
have to define that. Yeah, no,
Right.
that would be a
If
good
we-
idea.
Yeah, if we added that and said, if something comes outside of the current, ordinances, this can be presented to the supervisors as an innovation, and they can vote, and they can approve or send it to the PC or whatever, okay? But it does not require a zoning hearing board, or it doesn't require any sort of formal meeting of cost. It can be done fairly quickly, hopefully. Would that solve that?
I think so, because that's what I just making sure that we get our Ps and Qs in order.
That's why I recommend that, because I saw a lot of holes, and I thought that was a way of getting through some of these holes by putting in maybe just a one paragraph with that, say, as a catch-all.
May I ask a question?
Sure,
This is
John,
John Sullivan.
ask a
My
question.
question is, what are you talking about holes, and do you understand what about solar power is? Do you have any idea of what it does and what it takes to produce it? It's so simple. It's rudimentary.
What's your question for the planning commission, John?
Why are they talking about holes and what they need to do to regulate? I don't get that. You're talking about taking open space and taking people and their own land, and they will put solar panels on racks, not on the roof, to produce power for their homes, which I have done so for 10 years.
All right. I'm still not understanding your question. Please state the question.
Well, my question is, why is there a problem with putting solar panels on people's property to produce power?
I don't think
get
any,
this.
There
okay,
isn't.
so the question is, what's the problem? I don't think anybody in the planning commission or the board of supervisors has a problem with people using solar power.
So
Right,
what
but the way
That
it's
is not our
about-
discussion
John,
about it
John,
being a problem.
the way it's written, we say we don't want it in their front yards. Well, I have a huge front yard. I can't put it in my front yard. Some houses, the backyard comes up to the road, and the back of the house is the front. So it just seems kind of, I just think we're trying to legislate way too much. That's my 2 cents.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you.
I don't think it should be in the front yard. So that's.
I get that. I understand that. You're talking about what people see when they drive by an area. I get that. I understand that. You're trying, it's property enhancement. That's what you're after. But you have to understand something. When you're dealing with solar power, you have to understand what it's about and how it can be altered to make sure that it's productive and not producing for the people that are trying to, what there are certain solar companies out there right now are trying to create solar power, but taking advantage of people who don't understand what they're buying, and
All right,
at the
I'm
same
sorry, John,
time
but I'm
not
really,
reducing.
John, I'm gonna have to stop you. I'm really not understanding the applicability of what your statement is to our conversation right now. Do we see a problem? So we have a discussion specifically about whether we would allow them to be in the front yard or not. And I understand Donna, or both sides of the argument, because who knows what my front yard is. But somehow somebody would have to define that.
Yeah,
Right, but
well,
I think-
it is defined.
I think Chuck's comment about the innovative is the catch-all. So if someone comes comes in and as Nancy was saying, they have a huge front yard and no one would ever see it from the road anyways. And they come in to the board and they say, look at my setup, look at the setup of my house. I want to put it here. No one's going to see it. I'm going to have bushes in front of it. I think I would, this is just me speaking, we'd have to agree as a board, a pretty open-minded sense of what you could bring under that innovative category, and we could consider it based on that particular situation. But I would think in general, in a normal type house, you probably wouldn't want it in the front yard. It's just, but if we have that innovative category, that's our get out of jail thing. It brings people, if they have a case, bring it without a land development plan. Just
maybe we're getting hung up on the verbiage. Like, if maybe innovative isn't the right word.
Yeah, I just threw that out.
Yeah, well, I liked it because the example was innovative, right? It's something, but I think maybe there's an example of variance opportunity, right? Because the point being is, you don't, is Nancy's point, like she has a huge front yard. And if you put solar panels on the front yard, no one's going to see it from the road. It's not going to be like an industrial installation in a neighborhood, right? So I think we're thinking about a very specific situation where you have a big industrial, you just take up someone's front yard with a bunch of solar panels. And what we're really looking for is enabling people to get those solar panels that they need to power their house wherever they need it. But you also have to have some, thought to your neighbors, right? So I think maybe innovative is not the right word. Maybe it's some other term. I don't know what the word is, but
I thought of architectural could be one or something like that. We have to
alternative, an alternative.
Alternative
Yeah.
can be.
Right.
There's plenty. We just have to think about it and come up with one.
Non-conform. Yeah, there you go. Non-conforming.
I like that.
Non-conforming setup. That's a good one.
Okay.
I like that one. Non-conforming setup, and then we have a process for a non-conforming setup, which is basically the catch-all.
Yeah, that's good. Non-conforming design. I like it.
Yep, that's a good one.
Dave Hoffman, I don't know if we were going to move. I want to talk about E under the first group because I'm just confused about it. So I don't know if you're there yet.
Where would we put the non-conforming? Would we make that number 8? I mean, and I don't mean for us to write the ordinance, it's obviously going to be, probably need to be tweaked by Jessica or Pete, but we're making that, if your idea of solar panels can't meet all 7, then you're 8 and you come before the board.
Yeah.
Correct, that's what I think, because we want to limit it to the individual, right? We're going to talk about the non-individual in a minute. But it's almost
Okay.
like to get out of jail and make it number 8 as part of that list.
All right.
Yeah, because, right.
So yeah, we can go to E then, 5E.
Yeah, so the lowest vertical clearance of the solar array should be 10 feet or less from the ground. I'm really struggling to understand what that means.
The word, why the words are why it's there, because you
No,
want to.
physically what that means.
You want to have that space at 10 feet from the ground. That's how I read it. The lowest vertical clearance. So, however the ray is positioned, you want the edge of that ray to be no less than 10 feet from the surface. Oh, no more than 10 feet from the surface, right? So I look at the solar array is the panel, right? And the vertical clearance of that array, maybe it's a horizontal clearance. I don't know. But I look at it to be the edge of that array should be 10 feet or less from the surface. That's how I read it.
Okay, can I just provide a perspective? So if you drive up 82, you're going to see in Unionville someone who is very smart who put solar panels above their professional buildings so that the cars could park under the solar panels. So that's just one example of.
Yeah, but well, I shared a picture of Longwood's solar arrays, and I mean, 10 feet, that's a lot. That means the top of your panels are probably somewhere up around 18 feet high. Why are we creating?
What does it say? 10 feet is the
Lowest vertical clearance.
lowest. And
no, it's the highest. So
it's the
10
highest.
feet or less. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? 10 feet or
So
less.
it's the opposite we're looking at. It is legislated to be no higher than 10 feet.
Right.
Wait, so the top of the solar array can be no higher than 10 feet?
No, I'm thinking
Okay,
it's not clear.
That
So
needs some
I
work.
would suggest we get away from the wording and understand what's intended, and then we're going to have to reword it. So what is the intention of E?
Yeah, I think if you read the next sentence, the idea is that if you limit the height of the solar array, it's supposed to minimize the potential for accelerating the erosion due to a drip line. So that's the sense that I got from it is you want to limit the erosion that would happen if the water comes down at a certain height. I guess the higher the drops, the greater the potential is for erosion. So that's my understanding.
And Donna, that makes total sense. But if it's a paved parking lot, you don't have to worry about erosion.
That would be section 8.
Individual. We're still in the individual property, right? That's where I'm on. We're not in the non-individual place yet. We're in the individual.
Well, no, but I could very easily put solar panels where I park. And the example, I know the example that Nancy's referring to, I think it's actually East Marlboro or one of the Marlboro Township buildings that they park under them. I mean, it's great. It's a great use of space. Cars stay cooler and the sun's being captured by the solar panel. But they're high, the top of that panel is higher than 10 feet.
I don't know what the answer is, but if you could go into our non-conforming design then, if someone has that as an idea and they have it, and they're going to be doing it on a park, you said a road, a non-pervious, non-pervious surface, or is it a pervious?
I guess that's the point is we're kind of, I mean, maybe Donna, we're taking the easy way out, but by having that non-conforming clause, someone comes in and I just, was thinking, oh yeah, I could put solar panels at the top of my driveway and park under them. I would ask for, a non-conforming, whatever we call it, a variance or a waiver. So, I mean, maybe that's our catch-all, get out of jail free card to let people do what they need to do to get these solar panels in, without having to word each line item, 100% correctly, right?
Right. Give them a guidance that says this is what you would not have to come to us and talk about. That's 1 to 7. But if For some, and I think Nancy makes a good point. Technology is changing all the time. So, you know, as things change and other ways forward make more sense, come talk to us. Now, I'm not saying we're necessarily going to agree with you, but we want this. We want to make it easy for you. We don't want to make it hard. So, come talk to us, and we'll learn together.
I think the first section A through E should kind of diagram a model typical array.
Mhm.
And then we approach it that everything else we want to look at.
Chuck, do you think that those first line items does that? I mean, is there anything wonky?
I would want to read it again and think about it.
But I think that's kind of where we want. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
our intent, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're a standard homeowner, you're going to put solar panels on your roof. It's going to naturally conform to the normal, you know, thing that a resident does. And if it doesn't, just come talk to us and we'll figure it out, you know, and help you get it done. So.
Yeah, I think if it catches 50% of them, I think that's good.
Yeah, good. That's good. Good point.
So I have a question for Jessica. So we're looking at if somebody wants to build their solar array meeting 1 through 7 criteria, they would come for a building permit, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
With 8, what do they need to do?
That thought was just going through my mind as well. I'm like, okay, if we get thrown into that non-conforming situation, what is issued? And maybe it's still and I'm just throwing ideas out there. Maybe it's still a building permit, you know, approved as noted, or reviewed by the board and authorized, you know, with this exception. You know, since we're trying to avoid throwing someone to the zoning hearing board, which you can't do, it's a building permit, not a zoning permit situation. You know, that's, again, maybe it's just a matter of the language that you incorporate. And the bottom line being, I think that if it is non-conforming, I'm getting the impression that, you know, the township just wants to be aware of, number one, how much is this non-conforming for the individual? You know, is there a threshold that can cross where you're like, hold on a second, we're just not going to allow that. Maybe that's a discussion for later. But to answer your question as far as, all right, well, if it is non-conforming, this was meant to be a building permit, what do we issue? I would go along the notion of a building permit as authorized, or with the following exception, as authorized by the Board of Supervisors, something to that effect. At least you have it documented and you have it on record at that point.
They wouldn't get a building permit until they came to the board, right? So
correct.
Right.
Yeah, they'd still have to go and present, you know, to the board, but it just wouldn't be as formal, I'll say, as a zoning hearing board where, you know, you're in a courtroom situation,
right,
that kind of thing.
It could
and, you know,
be.
and keep in mind too, if as you come across these situations and whatever ordinance is passed, you know, and you find, okay, time and time again, we're getting non-conforming situations, you know, then it's time to maybe make amendments and revise as needed. So
Great.
I would think it'd be very similar to a HARB application, very similar.
Yeah, right. It's essentially the same, right? Same kind of intent.
Okay, as long as there's a mechanism that doesn't require a person to get an engineer to present.
Oh, yeah,
plans and-
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. That's
Yeah.
not the intent.
Are we good with A?
Think so.
And Jessica, have you made some notes?
yeah, I'm trying to document as we're going along here as best I can. So I apologize. You're just referring now. You're kind of going through items in number 5. Just letter A as far as land cover, etc.
Yeah,
You
I
may
don't
have
think we
lost me a little bit on what your focus was now.
Right, so the question, I think, the question I had for you, you answered as far as if we go, an applicant goes through this and it's non-conforming, 8 still has a mechanism that's, should be one visit to the Board of Supervisors and then then a building permits issued.
Right, I'm sorry. I
Um,
thought you said.
I'm not trying to speak out of turn, but I think we're on page 3 of 8, and the 8 would be a
Yep.
new number item.
Yeah, that, my bad. Sorry, I thought you were referring to the letter A, not the number 8. My bad.
yeah, I didn't want to start over again because we're done. Hopefully we're done A, and now we can have
Yes.
some fun with B.
Yeah,
I was like, oh no, what did I miss?
It doesn't necessarily need to go to the supervisors. We could have it go to the planning board.
I'm okay with that. My only question is, does the planning commission have to submit you would have to submit it to the board for approval, or can you approve that kind of a thing on your own?
If it's written, I believe we can approve that kind of thing. That would have to go before Mark, but I mean, there are planning commissions that actually approve directly. We don't do that, but I would think that for this particular case, possibly. I don't know. That's got to be reviewed by Mark, though.
Yeah, does that have to be, I suppose that would have to be explicit in the ordinance, right? To be approved by the planning commission.
And the
Yes.
board has to approve it too. So I think that's something we should take back to our
Well, that was my
meeting.
question, right? I don't know. if we
yeah,
can-
I think my understanding of the planning commission in the last 2 decades is we're an advisory board. We don't make the final decision.
Right,
We
and that's
advise
where I'm
the
at. I
Board
think
of
you guys
Supervisors.
provide advice, but I think it's up to the board.
Yeah.
to
Board of
say
Supervisors can,
They could
Board
give
of
us
Supervisors
that.
can grant PC approval authority, but that's a specific grant of authority. By default, it stays with the Board of Supervisors.
So I think until we learn more, I think we should keep it with the board and continue to use the PC as an advisory board and see where it goes. I mean, this is all new for all of us.
I think Donna's just saying that until she gets 2 applications a month.
And then it's all yours.
Yeah, I mean,
We
is there
don't
any-
want it then. We don't want it then. We only want it now.
Right.
You're good. You always take the
do we have any idea how often these solar panels come into the township? I have no idea how often these things get installed.
It's directly proportionate to the cost of gas.
Okay,
That's a good point.
yeah. 'Cause,
We're going to get a lot of them.
Can we move on to B,
Yep,
non-individual solar energy systems?
please. So I think
And
the
I think there was
biggest,
an issue with getting rid of, disposing that we wanted to talk about. But I don't know if there's any other specific issues you had in your list.
so I think we were all on the same page here, right? I think John brought up the bizarre catch-22 that you put in these demands to take down a solar panel array, a commercial installation, and there's no place to send the solar panels. So you can put money in escrow, you can have this commercial organization promise to decommission and get rid of the solar panels, and there may not be a place to actually send the solar panels. And they just kind of pile up. So I guess that was the sticking point, right? How do we protect ourselves as a township from basically just becoming a solar panel waste dump? Now, I guess it could be we write it such that we don't care where you put it, but you can't keep it here. You just put it on a truck and drive it somewhere else. But I think the way it was presented was there may not actually be a place to even take them because of the hazard. I guess they're considered hazardous waste.
When they're broken up and the glass is broken away, then they can be if they are exposed to rain over a period of time. I suspect, though, politically, there's going to be an answer to this. I just don't know what the answer is going to be. Everybody wants solar. And did I lose everybody? Because my screen went dead.
No, we're we're here.
We hear you.
We got you, John.
So I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a political solution to this. I just don't know what that is, because right now the thing that's stopping it from being moved around are these RECRA regulations. And I suspect that, I suspect the EPA is going to change those regulations to make it easier to move things around. But right now, it's a problem. It's not a big a problem for us right now because we're probably about 15, 20 years away from facing that situation. But by then, I think that problem will be addressed at the federal level. I don't know what the answer is going to be, though. That's the problem.
So I guess maybe really the only thing we can do, I mean, we have two choices. One is we protect ourselves the best we can and we put the escrow disposal requirement right into the ordinance, right? And the other one, which is less attractive, is you say you can't put commercial installations into Franklin Township. So I don't know if there's a third way, but those are the two options, right?
But yeah, my name's not Mark Thompson, but I think you run into an issue if you say you can't build something here.
Yeah, I know. But
my corollary or parallel question to that is, how do we establish an escrow for something we don't know how it's going to be handled?
That's a big issue.
Could be another question for Mark. I don't know if you can write something that says, here's the current disposal cost for a facility your size. Here's how much money you need to put in. And then at certain intervals, you revisit that escrow account to see how it changed, if there needs to be more money put in over a period of time. I don't know if that's even reasonable or not, but
Yeah,
Has
had talked
anyone?
about-
Sorry, Jeff.
Has
anyone-
they had talked about that in the past, revisiting that, one was, like every 5 years. With an agreement that it would have to be looked at, they'd have to submit a report, and it would have to be adjusted based on that 5th year inspection every 5 years.
that was a discussion specific to solar arrays?
Yes. I had heard that or read that somewhere, but they went back and they revisited that. I mean, you can pick what you want, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. But it gives you something to fall back on. So you're not dealing with a big problem 30 years from now.
Right.
With
I have a question for Jessica as well. In our brief conversation between Pete and Jessica and I, Pete raised that there may be a parallel or to draw from some previous experience with cell towers and with like electronic billboards, that there has been ordinances about how to decommission those. I don't know if we have any agreement with the companies that have cell towers in our township. I don't know if anybody on the meeting knows that either. But did Pete have anything particularly in mind, Jessica, when he was, other than shooting a big buck when we were talking?
I don't know of anything specific necessarily. I think I can look this up. I believe Amity Township. Well, I think the ordinance that you're looking at to adopt is largely based on one from Amity Township. So other than that, I don't have a specific. What I can offer though is Pete had done a little bit of research after our phone call. I can forward this information to you to distribute, but he was able to track down a company that does actually do solar panel recycling. Not sure how they do it or exactly how, but that might be something to keep in mind as far as the decommissioning requirements is, as I think Nancy pointed out, the regulations are going to be constantly ever changing. So to lock someone in, this is kind of, I'll say more of my maybe personal opinion. But also to lock someone into an escrow account that could be, perpetual for 25, 30 years could be a challenging event for the township to keep track of, on many levels. But maybe just referencing whatever, at the time that it's ready to be decommissioned, it needs to follow whatever the federal, state, local guidelines are as they hopefully evolve over the next decade or so. Like I said, Pete was able to find a company that does in fact recycle. So at least I think that just lets you know that there is somebody out there somewhere that can help to decommission solar panels. Might take a little research, but just something to keep in mind.
But Jessica, if there's no escrow fund, if there is no escrow fund, then we could be caught, right? Because you have this large company, they're done, they're finished, they're moving out, and it's hard to get money from Iraq, right? So are you?
Yeah, understood. Or if, I'm just throwing ideas out there. If another developer comes in and purchases the property, who knows, maybe it becomes their responsibility. I'm sure they don't want that responsibility. I think there's a lot of pathways that are out there for trying to decommission. I'm not saying don't require an escrow. I'm just looking at it from maybe an administrative aspect that it could be a challenging effort, but if it's a level of comfort though for the township, then certainly, protect yourselves as you said. It's certainly a good means of doing that.
Well,
You said something. Go ahead, Chuck.
No, you're more likely to get an escrow at the front end than you are after the thing's completed. So if we put that into our conditions and the people are willing to move forward, then we're going to get an escrow.
Right, that's what I was gonna say, John. I mean, we're all trying to answer the questions of a conditional use hearing before we ever have one. And knowing that all of these applications would have to have a conditional use, that's the time that the supervisors are gonna have to determine how the escrow's formed and how much. And
It is a deterrent. I mean, it costs people money to put these things together. So it is a deterrent. It's going to make something that was moderately profitable, marginally profitable. I guess it would make something that's grossly profitable only moderately. So and don't forget the people that own the land, they would see devaluation of the land if it is not cleaned up. And the EPA also is there to help protect us against damaged cells damaging the land. So there's other regulation potentially in position without us further. So there's an option. I don't know. Well, I know how I feel, but I don't know how the board feels. But I feel like it's an additional.
Yeah, but I guess it also, you're right. It's an additional cost to do business in the township, right? But does it also ensure that the people that are doing business in the township are serious, aren't necessarily kind of fly-by-night operations that, hey, yeah, we do this all the time, and here's our disposal plan, here's the escrow, this is our business, this is what we do, versus, hey, if you do this escrow thing, we can't make any money. I just feel like if they had a disposal plan, then whether they give us the money or they have it themselves, if they weren't, if they were serious commercial interest, we wouldn't necessarily dissuade them from coming here, right? Maybe I'm naive, but I feel like that's a way to protect the township where we're not relying on outside organizations to protect us, protect us for us, right?
I agree. I wouldn't be for it without an escrow fund. We're talking about we're in B now. We're not with A, but with those large commercial organizations,
right? Business.
We may not even get it right. I mean, we may be too low, but at least we have some escrow fund that shows, as you said, David, some seriousness on their part.
And
Because
That's
there's,
off. So I'll just say goodbye and good luck. We'll talk again.
I'm just thinking if there's a problem 20 years from now and mom and pop who own the farm can't deal with it or have the money to take it down because the company went bankrupt, DEP is going to be looking at the township to
it's another
fit the
good
bill.
point. It's another very good point. It's, you know, it has to get taken down. We let them in. We get stuck holding the bag.
And we're a government entity and have deeper pockets than
Mom and pops. Yeah.
mom and pop.
I'm getting a sense, and I don't want to put words in Chuck's mouth, but I almost sense like we're all in agreement that they should be decommissioned, and at the operator's expense through an escrow or whatever. I think if we're all there, then maybe the discussion's done, because it just has to be addressed then when the conditional use application comes before the board.
I agree.
You know, if that's if that's 6 months from now, then we have a lot of the same questions. If the first one to come is 6 years from now, we're going to have different answers to those questions.
Maybe it's a percentage of the installation cost. I don't know what that reasonable percentage would be, because obviously then it would be different for any, I'll say, commercial developer or non-individual. Some other comparisons maybe to make as far as just doing a little bit of research to kind of establish that escrow. I'm just thinking of gas stations when they come in, and I don't know the regulations per se, but you've got underground storage tanks with the potential for spills, leaks, etc. I don't know what, you know, as an example, Sunoco, Exxon, whoever, for an individual fuel station, what their responsibilities are, or whether escrow was posted for the potential for, you know, hazardous conditions. I don't know. That might be something else to just maybe take a little peek at and see if that's out there, just for some guidance in adopting this ordinance.
You know, I don't know if people would be open to this, but before I would approve this ordinance, I think it'd be quite easy to get a expert in residential and an expert in commercial, probably for nothing, to come in. It could be a workshop for the community to learn about solar. I just don't think any of us know enough about the current state to have this make sense. So what do people think? Would you want a solar day where we can learn more and the public can learn more?
I don't see any reason not to do something like that. I mean, I think for the residential, we kind of solved that problem a little bit, but for commercial, absolutely. Because I think that's where our biggest risk is. So if there is, so I'm absolutely open. I think it's a great idea. The only question is, I don't know who that person is that you would call to say, here's what commercial solar panel considerations are when you,
Yeah.
But of course, I think it makes sense.
Right. I have a good relationship with a residential, excellent installer, and they could probably tell me of one or two professionals that would be happy to come in on commercial.
I don't know what anybody else thinks, but Longwood Gardens has invented the wheel for themselves there. They have a large scale facility. Granted, it's not the biggest around, but I think we could get a decent idea from them.
That'd be great if we knew someone there. It'd be great to hear from them.
You know, if the board wants me to task me to get a hold of someone at Longwood Gardens, I will take on that task. I will gladly do it, but that's up to the board.
Well,
I don't see any harm in it.
Yeah, I say yes.
Jeff,
Okay.
if you're going to reach out to that particular facility, you might want to talk to the township that authorized it. You might get a different perspective then. talking to the actual owner of the facility.
That's a
Agreed,
good idea
Good
too.
point too. Yeah.
agreed.
I mean, from a planning commission standpoint, I don't think we have any issues getting more information.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an emergency situation. I don't think we have any, major installers coming in. So,
Let me ask this, just a general sense. If I can get a behind the scenes tour or meet with someone there, is there an interest in that? Or to actually be there, or would you rather have the person come to the office or be on Zoom?
Zoom.
Incredible. Now, would go for that in a minute. Or any of the planning commission you wanted, if you wanted the planning commission, I don't know, but that sounds awesome.
All right, I will start working on it, my end for that.
Are we finished discussing solar?
think so.
We do have, and I don't mean to be dragging this out, but we do have two other sections in that ordinance, and we maybe can go through it pretty quickly. The outdoor wood fire boiler, if there's any issues that people want to discuss about that. And then the geothermal, which I'm not really sure why it's even in there, because geothermal's been available and
Right.
the county.
It's
if
old
it's done by wells,
technology.
the county takes care of it.
It's old technology and it's already being eclipsed. There's technology that far outpaces it.
Do we want to just strike it? I mean, do we need it? Or does it just complicate the ordinance?
I would recommend that.
Okay.
I would agree
I'm
with
all
it.
right with it.
David, we don't regulate it right now, and you can go find a supplier to install a geothermal system. The only thing unique about it is the well, and the county regulates that. So I'm not sure that we need any regulation there at all. There are lots of these systems
so let's just
already installed with no major
strike it.
issues.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
why I brought it up. So
Let's just
Good.
strike it.
On the wood-fired boiler, I'm just curious, what's the rationale for the prohibition from May 1st through the end of September? I only ask, like, my father lives in upstate New York, and he actually has a wood-fired boiler that he uses year-round to provide hot water for the house.
I'm not that familiar with these systems, but when reading through this is a pretty difficult task. And it seemed like we were saying we're not, I wouldn't say that it's inaccurate in any way in the requirements. But I don't know that it's necessarily in the green. Maybe it's just its own little standalone.
I mean, currently we have a wood fire boiled system now that has been permitted by the township, and that's the McCleary's. That's at Hess Mill and Connords Mill Road. So I guess I'm asking, why do we need to revisit this? It hasn't been a problem in the past.
Has there ever been a problem with a wood-fired boiler? Like, or is this just something, was this an artifact of whatever we used as a template for a green ordinance? And that's why it got in here? Or was there a request to put something in there?
Dave, I never remember us having a problem or concern from any residents. And again, the McCleary's probably live on a 75 or 100 acre parcel.
Yeah,
But, we were able to work with them, and, there was no problems. It's just the way they choose to live life, to supply their hot water and their heat.
Is there any reason anyone on the planning commission or board would say, let's also strike this from the green ordinance?
Let's strike it.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Say nay.
All
right.
To answer your question, David, the original one that I think came before the planning commission, 2.5 years ago, also included wind.
Right.
and that's not here. Maybe we change the green ordinance title to solar ordinance.
Yeah,
But
let's do it. Keep it simple.
we're finished discussing the proposed green ordinance.
I think
think
so.
so.
So I think just to wrap it up for the minutes, I think the one action item before we finalize, because I think the group is in pretty good shape as far as where we're at, as far as where getting it to the board for us to approve or not, is to see if we can, in a timely fashion, get someone to talk to us about considerations on commercial installation and maybe someone to come in to consider residential installations. And then after that, we'll just finalize it with any notes that those people have. Is that the consensus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Good.
And then moving on to the next agenda item, Act 167. After our last PC meeting, there was a meeting at the county that Jessica attended. And since then, Jessica has an update for us of what we can look forward to and what has already transpired in the last month with Act 167.
And Jessica, I've made you a co-host if you want or need to share your screen.
Oh, okay. I don't know that I do, but thank you. I'm going to try and keep this actually fairly brief unless people have questions. I'll take one step back. I know Pete had given you the PC some information back in early November. The day after that was the big meeting, so to speak, providing ordinance updates and where it was going. Since then, I did join in on the board meeting, the last board meeting. So everything that I have to say now is pretty much the same as what it was in the board meeting, but I'm just going to focus on just a few key points that are in the packet that you received. First, in that packet, one of the things I'll just point out is there are a number of links to use on the internet that takes you to information regarding Chester County stormwater information and how this revised ordinance came to be. So I strongly encourage you to take a look at that in your spare time. With that said, just last week, Chester County did come out or released their final draft countywide updated Act 167 model ordinance. I will forward that information to Jeff for distribution to everyone. Within that email is a link to the final draft ordinance. There is also a link and an email where the township can directly provide or comments or questions. With that said, the public comment period is now open for municipalities, for the general public, et cetera, through January 7th of the new year. And again, those comments can be submitted via email, or there is a link in this email that allows you to submit questions. I know Pete and I, in reviewing the ordinance from a technical standpoint, we have, I'll say, maybe a dozen questions that we will be submitting. If there's anything that the township, if upon your review, if you get a chance, have any more questions, certainly present them to us, and we can either add them onto our list or submit them separately, however you choose.
Can you share your list with us, those questions?
Yes, certainly. Yep, I will put that. I'm in the process of putting it together, so it's a little more legible, I'll say. Right now, I just have a bunch of notes on a notepad, but I will be formulating that official list, and I will certainly share it with everyone. Some of the key components of, bear with me, I'm sorry, I had like 5 things specifically that I was going to point out. Now I've lost them. No. I did go over the date of the public comment period is now officially open. It is a 45-day period, so it does go through till January 7th. After that, just to reiterate the schedule of adopting this ordinance, after the public comment period is over, DEP would be submitting this the county would be submitting this ordinance to DEP for their review and approval. They're anticipating that between April and September, then the county would officially adopt the ordinance and then roll it out to the municipalities to adopt as well. One of the key components or one of the major changes that the PC was made aware of was regarding this simplified approach, and that it was going to be updated, and it was really going to cause, for lack of better words, some headaches for the small homeowner, single family dwelling lots. That has changed. The county has allowed the municipalities to keep their current simplified approach for stormwater management in lieu of adopting the new approach. You can certainly adopt the new approach, but you can keep what you have now. So the main question I think the township has to ask ourselves is what we have now working for us? If it is, great. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just to give you a quick recap, that updated simplified approach dictates that you can only choose one type of BMP or stormwater facility to use, and that would be an underground seepage bed, and that your roof drains have to be connected to that for your impervious area. And that's the only place that it would be applicable to. So it would eliminate the choices of, for people of installing a rain garden, a small infiltration basin, maybe a small trench along a driveway, using all of those in conjunction with each other. So that's the difference between the updated simplified approach and the current one. Again, if what the township has now is working for you, then keep what you have and, call it a day. That was, like I said, one of the major components of this new ordinance. As I said, touched on if what you have now is working, great. The format of the new ordinance as the township goes through to adopt it will be similar to what was issued back in 2013 when we went through this process before, where the township has options to choose from, again, based on what's working for you. And that's just a matter of notes to the editor in the document itself, as we go through and I don't want to say write the ordinance, but choose those options, we'll just modify it as needed. Pete and I know just from our experience with applications that we get, know some things that work and some that don't, but we'll certainly, look to the PC or the board for your opinions as well. And certainly if you have any questions, for us, we'll certainly be happy to answer them. Don't know that I have much more than that unless anybody has like specific questions with the content of the ordinance, but that's from a procedural standpoint. That's the timeline we're looking at and how we'll work to create the new ordinance or update it, excuse me.
Yeah, Jessica, I got some comments. This is John Auerbach. I'm going to recommend to the board and the PC to maintain the current simplified approach. So I looked at some of the details of the proposed change. It would make it significantly more difficult for the homeowner and small project manager to use the new approach. I believe it would force them to engage professional engineering at a cost that they do not need now. We really haven't had any significant issues with people using the simplified approach for small projects. Typically, the zoning officer can help them over some of the little bumps in it, but in reality, it's easy for them to use. It doesn't require them to engage a professional engineer. It's, I believe, the right choice. I don't have a whole lot that I could tell you about the details, but certainly we can if we want to get into it. But the second approach is forcing you to use an infiltration bed, and you can't use any of the other BMPs, which would be the rain garden, the rain barrels, a basin approach. And the problem with the infiltration beds is once they get clogged up, the only remedy is you got to dig it up and reinstall it. So the basins and other facilities are much more maintainable over a long period of time, and they're easy to implement. So that's really my position. I would hope that the board, when the decision comes up, which it looks like it's going to come up when we actually adopt the ordinance, because those options should be available to us. Jessica, is that correct?
Yes.
And that would be one of the options we could select, which
Yes,
is
that's correct.
maintaining our current simplified approach. So we do have some time to think about it, but there's a slideshow that Jeff put out that outlines some of it, and you can see that it definitely complicates the matter. You might want to spend some time looking at the current simplified approach, just page through that process, and you can see it's actually fairly easy to implement on small projects. So
I'm in agreement with you, John.
yeah, I've looked at this thing many times. I've helped residents with the drawing and the calculations. It's simple stuff. You got a square footage, you go over to a table and it tells you how big you got to make your BMP. So it's pretty easy to do. So I would hope that we can agree to maintain it. That decision looks like it's coming up next year somewhere. I guess September, when the thing is going to be adopted. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that the goal is for municipalities to adopt it by the end of September. So it'll be a matter of how long DEP takes to review and approve it and get it back to the county and for the county to adopt it. So
Well,
we're looking at spring through summer.
Well, quite frankly, I'm surprised they provided that option, because that hasn't been their position in the past. The last time this ordinance was developed in 2013, they had indicated that we had various options that we could select. In reality, those options were almost ineffective in any way at all. They weren't really options. It was implemented to the townships in a rather draconian way. Quite frankly, I expected that it would come out this way. So I'm pleased that they're going to give you that option on the simplified approach. So that's really all I got. The only other comment I got is that the ordinance is being developed by consulting and engineering firms who will directly benefit from the engineering services that are be forced on the residents. So there is some conflict of interest there from my perspective.
Yes, there is. I have a question about the specific, have they clarified if and when the 2,000 square foot ever becomes available again?
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen.
So,
yeah,
just to clarify the reason I asked that question. So you do a simplified approach in 2007 or 2010, whenever it first came out. And in 2030, you want to do another small addition. Now you have to hire an engineer to do that small addition. And that's what the county's still saying, that's acceptable.
Yeah, because my understanding, they're looking at it from a cumulative impervious perspective. And it's, I don't know that I agree with it, because it puts the new homeowner, suddenly they just want to add a small 10 by 10 addition, and it's now over the threshold of requiring stormwater management, except they're not the ones who put in all the other stuff, so to speak. Unfortunately, there's really no way around that by the ordinance itself. I would propose that it is certainly something that an applicant could request a waiver from, that the township might be willing to consider based on circumstances.
Can we do that?
I'll give you an example of something, well, it's maybe not exactly the same thing, but I had a situation in another one of our townships where, they have a 100-acre farm. They have, their buildings are literally in the middle of the 100 acres. It's 1,000 feet from all the property lines. They went over the threshold for requiring stormwater management in order to replace one of their barns. Now it was, maybe a 20% increase in impervious area over the threshold. But I specifically encouraged them to maybe go to the board and ask for a waiver, because looking at the circumstance, they're in the middle of this field with no one around them downstream. And point being, that circumstance, in my opinion, dictated that like this requirement is a hardship, I'll say. That's the basis of a waiver. So, it's as the township, as the planning commission, you could recommend that a waiver be granted. The board can accept or deny it, with the engineer's, review or recommendation. I don't know that I would throw that out there to everyone to say, oh, hey, just go ask for a waiver. But, if a situation presents itself and an applicant is inquisitive about what they have to do, it's something to keep in mind.
So Jessica,
Go ahead, Nancy.
yeah, thanks. Jessica, what is the upside to adopting it? And sorry, I haven't read it yet, so, I'm not educated.
Yeah, the entire ordinance or this updated simplified approach?
Yeah, 167, just the updated part.
Well, I'll answer that in two ways. The updated ordinance itself in its entirety is required to be adopted. So you don't really have a choice in that matter, but you have options within the ordinance. One of those being the simplified approach. You can keep what the township is using now, which was the simplified approach approved, 5 years ago.
Right.
Or adopt the new one. The new one is much more stringent in that if I'm putting on an addition on my house, that roof water has to be or can only be conveyed to an underground infiltration bed. That's the only EMP option that you're permitted to use with the updated approach versus maybe conveying it to a rain garden or
I get that. But I mean, we already have a stormwater approach with this. Why would we change from that to this? Is this better for the environment? Is it better for builders or worse for builders? Is it better for land development people? Who is this for?
It's always a good question. I think the original goal was to try and simplify the application process for the homeowner, meaning they've only got one option. It's this and only this. Here's a chart to choose the size of the BMP that you need to install. Now that the result of that was a lot of feedback from municipalities, from homeowners, from engineers, which dictated that the county is allowing you to keep your current simplified approach, because the new approach is definitely going to potentially cost a homeowner more money based on the size of the bed. That's the biggest thing of why you would not want to adopt this. I tried to simplify the simplified approach. I think they complicated it, which is why they've said now, you know what, we're going to leave that option up to the townships. If you like what you have now, or that's working for you, I should say, then keep it.
I'm with the other folks. I don't know why we would change it if there's not some benefit to something other than, people's pockets.
Yeah, I agree with that. Pete and I definitely agree with that. It's a better option.
Well, the increased cost will come at the homeowner to adopt the new approach in two ways. One is the facility cost is going to be higher because you're going to force them into a buried infiltration bed. That's going to cost them more than a basin or a rain barrel or some garden. And secondly, they're almost assuredly going to have to engage professional engineering services to do it, which they do not now. So to answer Nancy's question of why they're doing this, it's really the long arm of government, just ratcheting up control from the first ordinance, which you passed in 2013, to something that's more draconian right now. It's the natural progression of ordinances. So what's the benefit? Probably not all that much, because if you look at Franklin Township, the properties that are going to be affected by this are only things that are going to be developed new right now. This is 43% of our townships already developed with facilities, houses, and things on it, which will be unaffected. So we're spending all this money developing this expensive ordinance that probably will not affect very many properties or change the stormwater runoff very much. So I don't think it's a particularly effective ordinance in its overall sense. Secondly, all these designs are based on a 25-year storm. And the problems that we have, most people complain about stormwater, is when we have these big 50 and 100-year storms, and we've had a number of them. They overrun any of these designs. So I don't see it being all that effective, just my overall opinion.
So back to the question about if we're allowed to allow a simplified approach every 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, whatever we choose, by variance, which we weren't allowed to before. If we're allowed to do that, I think that's something we should definitely look at. Because it's not like we're saying you don't need to do stormwater. What we're saying is this simplified approach is now available to you again. So the stormwater BMPs are still put in place. The question is whether or not the engineer was required for the second impervious addition.
Yeah.
Right. I understand what I was saying before, the ordinance is still dictating that, cumulatively speaking, you are required to do the stormwater management. And yes, once you go to that full drainage plan scenario, you do need to hire an engineer. I guess all I'm proposing is that just like any other ordinance, a waiver could be requested to some extent, if there's a hardship there and based on circumstance. It doesn't, again, it doesn't mean that the township would grant the waiver, but I see it as it's an ordinance that, just like the subdivision ordinance, where a waiver could be requested. It would have to be reviewed.
All right, well, I think we all look forward to the few options that are given us over the next couple months.
Yeah, and I'll keep you updated. I will distribute a list of the questions that we have for the public comment. And then as we get closer to, I guess come springtime, once the county's adopted the ordinance and picking and choosing those options, we'll certainly be communicating regarding that. Again, if you go, I'm going to distribute the email tomorrow that has the link for looking at the final draft ordinance. Within that, you'll see where the different options are to choose from. So again, in your free time on the weekend, on Saturday morning, instead of watching the news, you could watch or read a stormwater ordinance. But Pete and I are on top of it, so we'll give you the best guidance that we can.
All right, thanks, Jessica.
Welcome.
So the next item, process and timing to select the temporary board of supervisor.
Yeah, so I can give you a little bit of background there. The last supervisor meeting, Mary McVeigh resigned as a supervisor. And so that immediately opened a vacancy on the board. The way it works is as soon as the board accepts a resignation, that opens a vacancy, and vacancies are forbidden by the second-class township code. So we must then appoint a supervisor to fill Mary's vacated seat. My understanding is that that seat will, that person will serve until the next municipal election. So that would be
It's 2023, David.
2023. They would be appointed to the board January 2024. So where the second class township code is pretty explicit, there's some wiggle room that's not applicable to us, so we don't really necessarily need to go into them. But the long and short of it is, the board has 30 days to appoint a supervisor. If we, the 4 remaining supervisors, can't agree on a candidate, then it goes to something called the Vacancy Board. And the Vacancy Board is the 4 remaining supervisors and the what's the official title? The vacancy chair, who would then sit with the board and act as a tiebreaker. So if it's two supervisors versus 2 supervisors, that vacancy chair essentially splits the vote. The vacancy chair can also put forward their own potential candidates. If at that point we can't decide, so we can't agree on anybody within that second 15-day period, it actually goes to the Court of Common Pleas, and a judge will assign us a supervisor to sit in that seat for the 2 years. I don't have any details on how a judge decides who gets to sit in the seat. I don't know if they go through the list of people that applied and decide themselves who they like the best. I don't know. Hopefully we can resolve it in when we vote, but that's essentially the path forward. And over the last few weeks, we've received resumes from folks from the township, applications. So, and I was very happy to see all the people interested. So that's great to see that kind of involvement. And unless there's a major issue with this, the where we had left it was the next board meeting is when we would vote on who would take that seat. That would be 2 days before the 30-day timeline. So the decision has to be made by December 18th because we accepted the resignation on November 18th. So if we can't come to that decision, that starts the 15-day clock.
So Dave, if I could just ask Jeff, when does the window close for accepting nominations?
December 8th, I understand it.
December 8th. Okay. So between the 8th and the 18th, or whatever you said the next Board of Supervisors meeting is, we need to invite those applicants to a meeting and we need to interview them. And from what I understand, we need to make that decision in public.
Right.
It doesn't have to be at that meeting, but it has to be made in public. And
we don't need to invite applicants or interview applicants if if the board chooses not to. The board can decide, or we can just have the applicants come to the meeting and speak on their behalf. So if you'd like, if there's a board meeting, we would have to have a second board meeting scheduled.
David, just a bit of experience. I went through the process twice before I got on the board. And the process is pretty much as you explained with the sequences of the time. But the way the thing was established or completed is the applicants did send in resumes, letters of intent. And in that board meeting, the applicants showed up. The Board of Supervisors asked them questions about their credentials. It went on for quite a while. And eventually the board made a choice. But there was never a need for a meeting ahead of time to invite applicants in there to be interviewed. typically you ask for resumes and a letter of intent. We've got quite a number of those. So I think it's up to the board in this interim period to review those resumes and make some fundamental determinations of who might be suitable. And then the board will make a decision in the December board meeting. That's the way it was done twice. Twice I was involved in the process before I became a supervisor. And there was no pre-interview. It all occurred in the board meeting.
I think it was, I think the where I took exception is that we're not required to have a meeting. We're not required to do anything other than vote at the meeting. It would be nice if we have the time, right? And if the board agrees to have a separate meeting where all of the applicants come and talk, or we can just do it at the meeting.
Yeah, Dave, I'll just reiterate what Holly says. The process must be public, and it is
Right.
up to the board how they handle it. We strongly recommend at least announcing it. We've done that, making it public. It certainly is worth considering a candidate, blah, blah, blah. Any discussions of qualifications and interviews must be held in public.
Right.
So anything we say, any review of the qualifications, we have to discuss that publicly.
Right, which could happen at the next board meeting.
Sure, it's just gonna be a long meeting, but yes, we could do that.
Yeah. I'm right. I'm just right. We're in agreement. We must do it. The question is, do you have two meetings?
Right.
And so, I don't know if we can make that decision here. I think we might want to have Donna be able to put in her 2 cents as well. I'm ambivalent about having a second meeting, 2 meetings for this process. I think we should give the candidates the opportunity to talk. Maybe we limit it so we don't, have people talking for a half hour. Maybe everyone gets, 5 or 10 minutes to say their spiel and have us ask some questions and then move on. I don't know if we can have that. I don't know if we want to make that decision here tonight. I don't know if there's another avenue for us to actually sit down and talk about that.
Well, it just comes down to whether we want to make another public meeting, have another public meeting. That's all it is.
Yeah.
The precedence is that has not been done that way in the past on 2 specific occasions that I was directly involved in.
Do we have a significant schedule for December that?
I
think
can make a meeting.
The meeting takes as long as it takes. It'll all be done in public as required by second-class township code. So I don't see the need for a second meeting.
Yeah, I just would hate to make people keep, coming to 2 meetings.
Yeah, but it's also not fair. We have these meetings that go to 11:30. That is not fair to the public. It's really not.
Well, that's.
We're here for the public.
Right. So, all right. Well, I think we can, I don't think I'm not sure if we want to make a decision now, if we're going to go ahead and have a second meeting.
Yeah, you're fine, Dave. We don't need to make it now.
Let's talk about it. And, I don't know if it's necessary. Let's think about it. There's a couple of weeks before we have to make our decision. So.
All right.
But I think, is the process clear? Is it, I think we laid it out. It's pretty, it's pretty linear. There's not that many variables in here. We're kind of stuck with the second-class township code. Hopefully we can get this resolved on the 15th and not have to go to the vacancy board.
Yeah,
So
I would hope so, David, because in reality, having a judge pick a supervisor for us would be, really be tragic.
yeah, that's
certainly you'd want a supervisor to be selected by election, but that's not possible for this particular situation. So the second best thing is for the elected officials who have been elected by the township residents to make the decision for the appointment. So I think at least that way, the residents are having some input through their elected officials.
So does that mean we invite our extra vote to the meeting? Whatever's Eric, is that his name? Eric, the vacancy person.
That's the way it was done in the past, that the person in the vacancy board was available for a vote and the selection meeting, so that in the event of a tiebreaker, the need for a tiebreaker, because there are only 4 supervisors voting, it's likely that could happen, that he'd be available to break the tie at that particular point.
So we could do it all on the
Rather than
15th.
drag it out any further than that meeting.
Right, that sounds good. So we have to
Yeah,
make
we
sure
should
you
do
can
that.
come.
Well, that's good to know, because my fear was, all right, well, what if we get stuck and now we've got to schedule a meeting between Christmas and New Year's to try to get this done. So if we can just have our vacancy board member at the meeting, I mean, I don't know, is that, then that solves the problem, at least for timeline.
Precisely. That ends the thing at the end of the December board meeting.
Good, because I wanted to kind of make that statement where I don't want to drag this beyond the 15th. I'd like to have something else to think about after the 15th, like Christmas presents and baking cookies. So
I like chocolate chip and snickerdoodles, Dave.
all right, I got you covered.
All right,
Make a
thank
mean
you.
chocolate chip.
Any further discussion for the supervisors on that issue?
M&Ms. I like M&M cookies.
All right.
I like fun size Snickers.
I don't know how to make those.
Walmart.
So next agenda item would be public discussion. Any public comment?
Dave, this will be very tame. When I say Dave Hoffman, can you come visit me at the office either on Friday or Monday, please? Like to
Sure.
discuss a good thing with you
All right.
at your leisure.
Yeah, I'll shoot for tomorrow, Jeff.
Thanks.
Any other public comment? I'd just like to say thanks, Jeff, for keeping everything together. And wish everybody happy holidays the rest of the year through.
Yes.
It's great
Thank
working.
you, David.
Thank
Great
you.
working with you guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Yes. Happy holidays.
We'll adjourn at 8:47.